Although there was still 8 local trains daily each way along the main Erewash Valley line in 1955, intermediate stops such as Trowell, Stanton Gate and Ilkeston Junction were quietly cut out in the 1960s, and these services had all ceased to run by 1967. Dr. Richard Beeching was brought in from outside the railway industry in 1961 to head the new British Railways Board at a time when government was concerned about continuing losses, which had been calculated at £42 million in 1960, and efficiency on the nationalised railways. He had been a senior director at ICI and was allowed the same salary when taking up his new appointment. This amounted to £14,000 more than Prime Minister Harold Macmillan's salary, which caused some controversy at the time. Over the next few months, teams of people carried out an extensive survey of British Railways. Debate continues to this day as to whether this was genuinely impartial or whether it was deliberately biased against the status quo. Beeching said that his enquiries revealed that about half the rail network carried 95% of its traffic, and that of the 7,000 stations, half generated 98% of the total passenger traffic. Beeching produced 2 reports. The Reshaping of Britain's Railways proposed closing 2,363 stations and the withdrawal of train services from about 5,000 miles of track. It was estimated that 70,000 jobs would be lost over 3 years. The uproar that followed its publication overshadowed his second report, The Development of Major Trunk Routes, which proposed a programme of investment to produce a modern core network. Neither report's recommendations were in fact completely implemented. This image shows that Beeching actually visited Stanton in June 1963, and he's seen here being greeted by the station master, Mr. Bradford. The Ilkeston Pioneer reported on 14th July 1961 that Ilkeston North Station was to receive a facelift. A modern flat-roofed precast concrete building was replacing the waiting rooms on the Nottingham-bound platform following a diagnosis of dry rot. Station master Harold Mather said the work would not hinder passengers during the busy holiday period. The whole station was also due to be re-signed in August, which involved repainting the whole station and all the signs and the removal and renewal of the poster boards. Mr. Mather said that he believed that when the job was done, Ilkeston would have a station it could be truly proud of in 1961. Reporting the same story, the Ilkeston Advertiser of the same date asked Mr. Mather if the work had been authorised since the controversial appointment of Dr. Beeching as head of British Railways. Mr. Mather was quoted as saying, "I think we'd better keep his name out of it. The repairs have been on the book for well over a year. It's a question of progress and the station will look the better for it." The following week's Ilkeston Advertiser carried a photograph of the demolition works in progress and reported that the work was expected to take about 2 months. On the 6th of July 1962, the Ilkeston Pioneer carried a story headed "Beeching Acts on Ilkeston North" and said that Dr. Beeching's economy axe is to be felt in Ilkeston. British Railways hope to save £2,281 a year by discontinuing the Sunday service through Ilkeston North from Derby Friargate to Nottingham Victoria. The proposal to cut the service is to go before the Transport Users Consultative Committee with reluctance, say British Railways. A statement on the proposal says the 4-train-a-day service is no longer an economic proposition. It quotes figures which show that one Sunday a total of 11 people boarded Nottingham-bound trains at Ilkeston and only one person made the Derby journey. The closure will mean that for the first time in its 70-year life, Ilkeston North Station will be closed on Sundays, except of course for excursion trains. The Ilkeston Pioneer reported on 1st of November 1963 that at the East Midlands Transport Users Consultative Committee meeting, objectors had suggested alternative money-saving plans, including dieselisation of the Friargate line, the converting of stations to unstaffed halts, the running of units with a combined conductor and guard, and the extension of the Grantham to Nottingham diesel service along the line. BR dismissively said that the route was covered by several bus services operated by Trent, Felix and Midland General. Objections were received from firms, local councils, trade unions and political parties, as well as individuals. However, BR stated that estimated earnings from the line were £32,000 a year, and what they called estimated direct costs were £123,000. Renewals due over the next 5 years would be saved by the removal of passenger services and were estimated at another £10,000. In a written protest, Stanley Parish Council said that between 30 and 40 business and working men used West Hallam Station every morning. Ilkeston Corporation's official objection said that the Borough Council considers that hardship will be caused to the users of the service by the proposed closure, especially to work people who regularly use the service to travel to and from work at New Basford, Derby and other places on the line, school children who regularly use the service to and from Michael House School, to shoppers who use the service to Derby and might well use it to Nottingham if there was an afternoon train, and to all sections of the public who use the service to travel on annual holidays and on day excursions, notably to the Lincolnshire coast. BR had named Ilkeston Junction as an alternative rail service, although at the time it too was being considered for closure, and the council said it did not seem fair that the present proposal regarding Ilkeston North should be dealt with in isolation on the basis that one of the available alternative routes might well be the subject of a subsequent similar proposal by the Railways Board. The council also suggested that a diesel service might be introduced, as it was understood that the cost of this would be only 30% of a steam service. That would reduce the annual loss from £91,000 to £24,500, which completely alters the picture, they said. The council submitted that an average of 160 passengers a day left Ilkeston North and a further 196 arrived, and that this warranted the trial of a diesel service. Town Clerk Mr. Jack Yates told the committee that the council was at a loss to understand why the Railways Board had allowed the heavy losses to continue for so long when the remedy was in their own hands in the form of diesels. Ilkeston solicitor Mr. H.A. Brewer, representing West Hallam Parish Council, also called for a diesel service and suggested that using unstaffed halts rather than fully staffed stations could turn a loss into a profit. He suggested that there had been a deliberate policy towards the line in recent years which considered the line was a dead letter and should be forgotten. Ilkeston was a centre more prosperous now than ever before. More people were travelling and the town was already cluttered up with buses. Mr. Brewer also wondered how the excursion traffic would be dealt with. BR's divisional manager, Mr. G.B. Gray, said that as far as excursion traffic was concerned on the line, it would be handled at the alternative stations named. It was hoped to demolish the stations as soon as was practicable and that the railway would maintain the line only up to freight level. He said quite a lot of consideration had been given by the railways as to what could be done to make the line pay. Diesels had been considered, but the line was so little patronised and the area so well served with buses that the only alternative was to abandon it to passenger traffic. Where diesels had been used up and down the country, passengers had increased, but in many cases not in sufficient numbers to make lines pay. The Ilkeston Advertiser of 10th July 1964 said that 4 local railway stations, Ilkeston North, West Hallam, Orsworth and Kimberley East, will be closed to passenger traffic from September 6th. The Minister of Transport, Mr. Ernest Marples, gave his consent on Monday to the proposal by London Midland Region of British Railways for the withdrawal of all passenger services between Derby Friargate and Nottingham Victoria, as well as the local stations Derby Friargate, Basford North and New Basford will also be affected. However, parcel services are not likely to be affected directly. A plan is at present being worked out, and a spokesman for the railway told the advertiser, "What will happen is that the station will receive parcels. These will then be taken probably by road to the nearest passenger station. In the case of Ilkeston, it would be the junction station. The service to the customers will not in fact be at all affected by these changes." Ilkeston Town Council, who protested strongly about the closure, are seriously disappointed. Town Clerk Mr Jack Yates, on hearing the news, said, "I thought we'd made out a good case for at least a trial diesel service between Derby and Nottingham. I'm very disappointed indeed that the Minister has not thought fit to try this." Despite substantial and well-argued opposition, all passenger services were ended at Ilkeston North and at West Hallam and Orsworth in September 1964. The diary section of the Ilkeston Pioneer on 11th September 1964 bore the headline, "Ilkeston North shuts its doors for the last time after 86 years. The end." The gas lights were put out one by one and, his footsteps echoing, Foreman Clarence Johnson walked over the bridge and locked the doors to the public for the last time. Then, at about 11 o'clock on Saturday night, Ilkeston North died as a passenger station. For Mr Johnson, it was a sadder moment than for the stalwart enthusiasts who had a few minutes earlier been on the platform to see the last passenger trains go through, one to Nottingham and the other to Derby. For at the age of 52, and with 37 years' service on the railway, these were his final duties. Now he seeks other employment. "She's 2 minutes late," said Station Master H. Mather. "I feel like a captain seeing his ship going to the breakers." Announced by a detonator, the Nottingham train pulled in, whistle blowing and enthusiasts leaning out of the windows, ringing bells and waving. A few quick pictures, a farewell wave, a defiant hooting from the train's whistle, and we were off into the dark, just as many thousands of people had gone in the 86 years the station had served Ilkeston. Men going to the Boer War, the Great War, and the last Holocaust had left just the same way, many never to return. Honeymooners, holiday makers, all had travelled this line, and as if in sympathy with its closure, the rain poured down. The axe had fallen. Southward, the track of the new age is making its mark. At Trowell, work on the M1 extension is already changing the countryside, but somehow I don't think that will win the same affection as the railways have. In 1965, after publication of the second Beeching report, Richard Beeching fell out with the Labour government and either resigned or was sacked, depending on whose account you believe. They made him a life peer the same year, and he died in 1985. In the end, the change of government made no real difference, and soon the area's other local stations were targeted. The Pioneer carried a headline, "Barbara signals the last train" on 23rd September 1966, saying that Ilkeston would sever its final connection with the age of passenger railways with the closure of Ilkeston Junction Station, announced by Transport Minister Mrs Barbara Castle. Also axed were Trowell, Stapleford and Sandyacre, Stanton Gate, Codner Park, Langley Mill and Long Eaton stations on the Erewash Valley line, meaning there would be no passenger station within 10 miles of the town. Track was taken up, and eventually the remaining station buildings on the Friargate line were demolished some 10 years after closure. Landmark local bridges like Thelson Bridge at High Lane East, Castle Bridge at Cockmanay and the Spinney Bridge over Little Elm Hill were removed in 1971. Other bridges were demolished and cuttings filled in over the next few years, so that by the early 1980s there was very little to show that the former JNR line ever existed locally, although it had been fully functional less than 20 years earlier. Very much less is visible today. The large network of lines serving local collieries closed with the last local pits, so that by the mid-1960s very little was left. Even Stanton's very large internal network shrank and died following the demise of its mainline connections and had disappeared completely by the 1990s. And so, despite still being on the Midland Main Line, Ilkeston began its 50-year wait for a new railway station. Proposals came and went. Finally, something was done, and despite delays due to great crested newts and flooding, the new station opened in 2017 on the old Ilkeston Junction site. Despite a sometimes unreliable service from northern trains, the new station has been quite well patronised and has attracted some celebrity locomotives on rail tours evoking the lost days of steam. If it weren't for the old Hena Road Bridge, it would be difficult to see where the Frygate line passed, although the goods shed existed for a while, but has now been demolished and the site used for housing. You can still follow the route towards Bentley Viaduct, more or less, in what is known as the Cotmanay Linear Park. On the other side of the bridge, you can follow the route past the police station, built on the track bed, past Manners Industrial Estate and the site of Stanton Junction signal box. The land has been heavily infilled here, so you're walking many feet above the level of the tracks, and modern tree planting has made it difficult to gauge the true width of the cutting. You can follow this well-surfaced footpath past Peewick Golf Course almost to the old Thelson Bridge site at High Lane. Although what's left of the GNR's Stanton branch is difficult to access, part of the Midland Railway's Stanton and Shipley branch can still be walked as part of the National Cycle Network. This is a very well used bridge seen from an unfamiliar angle, the bridge at the bottom of Derby Road. You can follow the line right down to Crompton Street at Hallam Fields. Thank you for listening.